So today we talk about Docker Compose. Okay. So what is Docker Compose? What is the purpose of Docker Compose? Can anyone tell me what is Docker Compose?
To deploy multiple containers, which have dependencies, we can use compose.
Yes, exactly. See, with Docker file, what we are going to define in the Docker file, we are going to define to create an image. We are not even creating a container. We are creating an image with the Docker file. So whatever you define inside that, we can create an image with that, and with that image, we can create a containers. Okay. But the Docker Compose is for creating multiple containers. Okay, and the multiple containers means if they are as someone said, it's a dependent. Like for example, you want to deploy some applications. Like for example, we have three-tier application will be there, right? Front end will be there, middleware application will be there, and backend database will be there to run any dynamic web servers. So these are the architecture we use. So all three are just compulsory to run single application. So front end and middleware and back end, these three are required. So if you want to do the same thing in the containerization, then three containers are required to achieve this. So whatever the front end the website is accessing, it will access through the middleware, and then backend will go and store in the database. Okay, so this kind of scenarios, all these three containers requirements can be specified in the Docker Compose, and if you execute the command docker compose up, then what are the things has been defined inside the docker compose, it will be created as a containers. Okay, so in these scenarios, for example, lot of examples we have. So WordPress, if you take WordPress, if you want to create WordPress server, then it will create multiple containers. Okay, so for that we have a predefined docker compose file is there. Okay, so if you take a main stack application, we have a predefined Docker Compose file is there. So main stack application we can achieve, like we have lamb stack, same way we have a main stack also. Okay, so like this default files are available, but in your organization, whatever is the requirement for your application, how many containers are required, and what should be the backend if the database is there, all together you can write a Docker Compose file, and you can create the containers by using that Docker Compose file. So here we write this Docker Compose file in the YAML format. I hope you guys are already aware about the Ansible, right? So Ansible, we use a YAML format. It's a very simple format compared to JSON or HTML format, XML format. YAML format is very easy to understand. It's very simple. It's like a key value pair format will be there. So it's not complicated like JSON or XML formats. It's like it's not a programming language. It's a syntax based files will be there. It's a YAML file. So Docker Compose file also we use YAML syntax, okay, YAML format. Okay, so by default, Docker Compose will not be available with Docker installation. You need to install the Docker Compose, and so if you go into the documentation of official website, so Compose is a tool for defining and running multi-container Docker applications. With Compose, you can use a YAML file to configure your application services. Then with a single command, you create and start all the services. So all the things will be defined inside the YAML file. So it's single command, you can create all the containers requirements inside that file, whatever is defined. So here define the services that make up your app in Docker Compose so that they can be run together in isolated environment. And this is a command, means wherever this file is there, Docker Compose file, go to the directory and execute Docker Compose up. So it will trigger this file, and whatever is defined inside this, it will get created. And let's see, WordPress Docker Compose. Mm, So to have the WordPress server, we can have this is a Docker Compose file. Okay, if you see, this is a Docker Compose file for that one, and this is a WordPress, and this is a database. It is getting created, and this is a for WordPress container. It is going to take these images, and it's creating volumes also. So whatever is required to run on, and if you see, depends on if it is MySQL. So MySQL container also should be created for this one, and one is created for PHP MyAdmin. It is getting created. So these many containers it is getting created if you use WordPress. Okay, so all this together will be created in a single go. Or else, if you can take mean stack application. So mean stack application is for MongoDB, Express.js, Angular, and Node.js. So that is the meaning of mean stack. Like lamp stack is there, like Linux, Apache, MySQL, okay, and PHP. These are called as a full stack applications. So if you want to achieve mean stack application, and if you see, this is a Angular is a client, front end and back end server, and this is a database. So whatever the website runs, dynamic websites, the data is coming, it is going to store inside this MongoDB database, and it will create three containers for Node.js and Express.js. It will create one container, and front end client it will use Angular, and back end database it will use MongoDB. So if you want to create individually, then you should have three different files, Docker files, and these are the Docker files. We can use them. Okay, so this is another Docker file. But if you use Docker Compose, so you can use, by default Docker Compose will not be available, so you need to install. We can use this command to install the Docker Compose, and then this is the simple file to configure all these three containers. And if you see here, service, so Angular, it is going to be created with this particular port, and Express.js, and this is using 3000 port number, like right, port forwarding how we do, the same way it is doing. And if you see here links, it is going to link with the database, and database it is going to be created image, it is taking Mongo. Okay, so with this it will create three containers, and database container will be created, Express.js container will be created, and all these three will be linked. So we can able to access the website if it is really having in the website in real time. So you are going to have your own images, your uh, for
Praveen,
example, yeah,
one question. So,
yeah,
so if we launch containers from this, so database will also be exposed outside, right?
if we
Launch container from this Docker Compose file. So
hmm,
database like 27017, that port will be exported to outside.
outside,
I mean,
yes, yes,
ex-
you can
yeah.
able to access it from the external world.
Okay, we have to block it, right? I mean,
If you don't want, you should not export the database port. Don't export the port so that you cannot able to access from the external world.
how to access from only the front end in this?
What what you want to access from the front end?
I want to access database from only web server.
Only from?
Web server.
Hmm.
So how can we map the ports in that case?
I did not get you.
I think he's asking. I think he's asking. There are three containers, right? From the first container, which is the front end, and the middle
Hmm.
one is the middleware, and the third one is database. If we block
Hmm.
this port from the external world, but how can I access from the first container?
See,
Yes,
from
correct.
it's very simple. In Linux machines, assume these are Linux machines. So from one Linux machine to another Linux machine, in one other Linux machine, if you are accessing a database is there, and there is another Linux machine. So how we are going to access the database? How you will access?
Port, user ID, password.
Yeah, the same way you are going to use it. Internally, they can communicate. If you are not doing port forwarding, then you cannot able to access from the external world. But internally, you can able to access it because here containers all are running on the same host and its port is there. So how to connect MongoDB? What are the commands you use? Okay, so those commands you use from the container, web container, whatever the web container you want to use, log into that, and you can use the commands to connect, access the uh, database. What are the MongoDB? If it is MySQL, then MySQL hyphen H, the name of that container, and then port number hyphen new username, so that it will connect to the MySQL database. Same way, some commands will be there to connect the MongoDB. Same way, you are going to connect by logging into the this container. If this is the case, then we can able to access it from the external also. Okay, so these are the simple example files which we can use Docker Compose so that we can create multiple containers. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I need to install Docker Compose. So with this curl command, I'm going to install it. So before that, let me log in. Okay, so the command, whatever we got, the Docker Compose has been moved to USR local bin so that we can execute that command. Now, if you check Docker hyphen compose, so this is the command, and these many options will be there for Docker Compose build, bundle, config. Depend upon the requirement, you can use it. Okay, so Docker up, create and start containers means wherever your Docker file is, Docker Compose file is there, you should go to that particular directory, like how we were executing Docker build -t and the present working directory of the Docker file. Same way, so we need to execute Docker Compose up means wherever in whichever directory we are present working directory, there Docker Compose file should be there so that it get executed. And Docker down, stop and remove containers means whatever the components got created with the Docker up, everything gets deleted also. Stop and it will get deleted. All the components, whatever it gets created. And start and stop is Docker Compose service will start if you use Docker Compose start, and stop will do Docker Compose service will be stopped. Okay. So and many more options are available based upon the requirement. You can use it. So now let me copy this file, this one. So let me create a directory, or So let me create a file here itself. And this should be inside with the YAML format. Okay, so here we can execute docker hyphen compose up. Hmm, root express server either does not exist, is not accessible, or it's not a valid URL.
think his name is wrong. Docker.compose.yml.
For Angular and Express use it build. It is three Docker files should be there. One is with Angular app, another one is Express server, and another one is Mongo.
Hmm. So instead of this, let me go with the WordPress. Okay, so this is the one we can use it. So WordPress, we would like to access mkdir. So here, let me execute docker compose. In the wrong compose file version specify supported example or
Yes, maybe it's like a YAML is no. YML.
no, not sure, but in Kubernetes it will take YAML or YML. It can take anything. Okay, let's see. It is staying inside the file. What are the version I defined? 3.6 is not supported, so that's why we need to change the version. Okay, so let me change the version here. 3.3. The supported version is 3.3. Means whatever the Docker Compose version we are downloading and what version we are defining inside the compose file, that matters. Okay, previously for main stack it was using 3. That's why we installed as per this document. We were using 3 version. Okay, so but now when I'm trying to see here, this is a 3. So now to use this WordPress, it is expecting 3.6. So that's why whatever is got installed, which is not supported. So if I use, because now it's telling
Okay.
specify supported version 2.2 or 3.3. Okay. So whatever is this? There is no official. Let me check with Bitnami. Okay, now it is getting created. So one of the provider is Bitnami is also one of the good provider. So from there we copied the Docker Compose file. Okay, so which contains if you go here the Docker Compose file. So this is for same WordPress and this is a MariaDB database it is going to create. And if you see the Docker image, if you have your own private repository, then you can use that location, and it's going to create one volume and environment variable for username and password. And for WordPress, it's getting created the image from here, the WordPress image, and this WordPress image is this the ports we can able to see. Okay, and this WordPress is dependent on this MariaDB, and these are the environment variables has been configured for this one. Let me see.
MariaDB installation commands are not there in that YAML file, right?
See here the image is there, right? Where is that?
That is for WordPress. I
This
guess
is the
there is
image.
another file with the name MySQL in the GitHub.
If you get the image, then automatically it contains a MariaDB. We
Okay,
don't need to
okay,
install manually.
okay.
If you see
MariaDB and
here,
version is
yeah,
mentioned here, right?
Bitnami
Okay,
MariaDB image it is getting downloaded and it's getting creating
okay. Two
container.
images are there. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. First image is MariaDB and second image is
Yes.
WordPress image. Okay, got it. Thanks.
So this is how it got created. And if you see the volumes, we discussed about Docker volumes. So the local storage driver, for using it, it's creating two volumes which will store the data, because database means data should be available. What are the data is coming? Okay. So here, let me go and see how many contents got created. So these are the two contents got created. One is WordPress and one is MariaDB got created. And so if you see here, this is not port forwarding was not done for MariaDB. So if you see here, internally it can communicate, means container can communicate. It's WordPress container or any other container can able to access, because if they are in the same network, they can able to access this MariaDB database with 3306 port. And this one, if you see, port forwarding has been done for WordPress. Okay, so now we can able to access with this IP of this virtual machine, whatever we are using. So it's an AWS machine, so obviously it contains one public IP. This is the one. So let me access it. So welcome to WordPress. This is your first post, edit or delete it. So this is a WordPress web page has been opened, and whatever we want, we can able to do it in case if we are very good in the WordPress. Okay. So with this
Is this
today's date,
Praveen,
yeah,
is this installed on the EC2 machine or the container?
container. This is a
Mm.
container. But where container is running, how you will able to access it from the external world? The machine IP, right? If
Yeah,
you
machine
install
IP.
in your
Yeah.
laptop, Docker you
Mm.
install in your laptop, and you created a container, let's say Jenkins container you created, how you are going to access in the web browser? By using the localhost, right? Because it is installed
Yeah,
in your laptop.
localhost with some port, I believe,
Why we are not
but this
using
is
port?
really
Because here port forwarding it's using 80. So for HTTP
oh,
we don't need to use by default 80.
okay, got it. Yep.
Obviously it will use 80 only. If apart from 80, another port, if the websites or any application are using, then we should give that port number along with the IP. But here
Yes, got it.
internally it is using 8080 container, but it's port forwarding as an 80 only. So that's why I did not give any port number here to access it.
If you give 80 also, it will not show you. It will take by default, right? So it will not show you.
Yeah. So that's why we can able to access it. So if this is one container. If you are creating, you cannot create another container with same 80 port forwarding. Okay, you might be using some other port. So at that time, I will use that port number with this IP so that I can redirect to that container application, or whether it's a database or whether it may be any other application. So we already discussed about this in the port forwarding concept, right? So this is how we can able to access, and these are the two containers got created. So the main purpose of this is to create multiple containers which are interdependent on each other. So in that scenario, we can able to use Docker Compose. So all together will be created. Okay, very rarely we'll get use of this Docker Compose in the real time. Very rarely we may use it. Okay, but even though if you want to use, we need to know how we can write it. So it's very simple. It's like a Docker file. Difference between the Docker file syntax and this syntax is different. So here it's a complete YAML format. It's like a key value pair we need to give it. And if you use Docker hyphen compose,
Can we scale this application?
scale means
I mean, like 2 containers of web server and 2 containers of DB.
no,
Application.
that will come as an orchestrator. The
Okay.
next what we are going to discuss from tomorrow onwards, which is called Kubernetes. So in the orchestration tool, it is possible to scale up, scale down all these things. Individually, you cannot do that. So Docker Compose will stop the Docker Compose service. Okay.
Praveen,
Yes.
so uh, regarding the scaling part, okay. So
Hmm.
we will mention one as web server, other as DB, okay, in our compose file. And
Hmm.
can we, like give that command like web server? So we have already written, let's say, we have written a Docker compose file, okay, which has configuration of web server and database server, okay.
Hmm.
Then after that, we'll do Docker compose up. So at that point in time, so can we mention how many web server containers we need, how many DB server containers we need, and we can run that?
No, we cannot run replicas over here. Okay. So that will be possible only if you are using either Docker Swarm or maybe any orchestrating tool like Kubernetes. There you can define, but here you cannot run. Okay. So here we have an option called scale, set number of containers for a service, Docker
Yes.
Compose. Let me check what is this option. This command is deprecated. Use the command with hyphen scale flag. Cat. So Docker hyphen compose scale MariaDB equal to 2 and cannot have a driver failed programming external connectivity. Port is already allocated. So maybe it is not allowing to create port, but maybe this is possible with the scale command. Okay, so we can use the value, whatever the values we want to give. But if there's one container is using one port, how come another container is also going to use the same port here? Okay, so that's why if you see here, cannot start service WordPress driver failed. external connectivity on endpoint WordPress, it is giving error. Port is already allocated. So whatever the port is used for this specific container, so if it is getting created another container, then for that container it cannot able to use again same, it cannot use internally, it can use, but it cannot do the port forwarding. So 88 80 on 80 port number, two containers cannot run. Okay, so if you see here, it is not
So
possible
you
to do
mean to
the
say
port forwarding.
we need to modify the YAML file, port
But
numbers
then
in order
what is the
to.
point if you are using another container with 81 port, then there are two different things, then how you are able to access it?
Okay.
So that's why this SWAM or orchestration tool comes into the picture. So if there is any not port forwarding concept is there, then you can scale it. But in real time, if any application is running, if that application is using some port, okay. So maybe if this is an 80 port number, and this, if you want to scale this application, so here also it should run 80. So front end, like multiple containers, if you are scaling up, overall this should have like a kind of a load balancer. From here the traffic will come and it will access, and it will send the request to each individual containers. But here, without Docker Swarm or Kubernetes or any other orchestration tool, it is not possible, because when you are trying to create container, it is telling in the internally it should not, again you cannot expose 80 port number. This we discussed in the port forwarding. So one container if you are created with port forwarding 80, and again you forward to 80, and another one should be like 8081 or 8082 you should use. So if there are two different ports, then externally they cannot be accessible together. They are like two individual components, okay, two individual containers. So if there is no port concept, then you can create, but again as I said, they are not together, they are like two individual containers only. Okay, so there is no concept of your application scale up and scale down. Whenever there is a high load, then another container should be created, and another so both should be serve the application. So that is not possible, because here both the containers cannot have the same ports. Okay.
So if we bring down Docker Compose, our containers will also come down.
So as I said, Docker hyphen compose here, down means what it will do, it will delete whatever the components it gets created, and it will remove all the containers or networks or whatever it got created, everything it gets deleted. Okay. And if you do Docker stop, okay, then only Docker service will be deleted, but whatever the components it's there, so it will be available, but it will be not in the accessible state. Okay, so if you see two volumes also, it has been created, means in the compose file it is defined to create volumes also, means it's created two containers and volumes. And if you see Docker images, it's downloaded Docker image, the WordPress image, and MariaDB image. So these images will get deleted, and volumes gets deleted, and containers get deleted if you use Docker uh, down. Docker stop means only that Docker compose service will be stopped. Okay, Docker compose hyphen stop, if you do, only stop the Docker compose service. Okay, it will not delete any of your resources. That is the difference.
Okay.
Okay, so this is about Docker compose. So tomorrow onwards, we are going to start the Kubernetes sessions. So before that, just I want to give, like someone asked me in the previous sessions about, I'll give some overview about Docker Swarm. Okay. So as we discussed till now, whenever we are creating a container, okay, it is creating on a virtual machine, one virtual machine, and this container is getting created. So we don't have any kind of high availability for this container. Let's say if it is having we configured this container with port 8080 exposed, and we are accessing from the external world, If something happens to this virtual machine, then there is no chance of again recovering this machine. So how we can achieve high availability, how we can run multiple containers which serve the same application, and whenever anything happens to this one, how will auto scale, how to create volumes, all these things we can achieve with the orchestration tool. So already we discussed orchestration tool are available, Docker Swarm and Kubernetes and Mesos and Cloud Foundry. These are some famous enterprise level orchestration tools are available. So why we don't use Docker Swarm? Because Docker Swarm will have limited features and Kubernetes having lot of features compared to Docker Swarm, and that is the reason, and a lot of community is also there for support, so which can help us troubleshooting the solutions, and it's a free of cost open source, so that's why we use Kubernetes instead of Docker Swarm. But just an overview how Docker Swarm will work. So basically we don't need to install any separate package for Docker Swarm, so you can use Docker Swarm init to initialize. Okay,
How to link with the DB container and web container?
how to in the WordPress
Link.
automatically it is defined. If you see here, in the WordPress it is depends on, if you see here, depends on hyphen MariaDB, and these are the environment variables which we are using inside the WordPress. Okay, so MariaDB port number and MariaDB host, here we are defining. So that's how it is going and connecting to that database.
Thank
So Docker Swarm, just if you execute Docker Swarm init command, it is giving a command to join the nodes. So whatever the nodes you have, let's say if you have multiple nodes, so this is one machine, and it's the same way you have multiple machines. Assume we have 4 virtual machines. Okay, so all the machines should be installed with Docker software, and very simple. So this Docker should be available in all the machines, and once I executed a Docker Swarm and init, then what it is going to do, it is going to initialize this cluster and it will give you this command. So what we are going to do, we need to execute this command in all this workaround. So this all will become one cluster, and at that time it will create the network. Okay, overlay network. Previously we were talking about bridge network, right? Then it will create overlay network. So once we execute that command in these machines, then this will be part of this cluster, and this machine wherever I executed Docker Swarm in it will become as a manager node, and these are will become worker nodes. Okay, so the Docker Swarm is going to manage from here, and these are called worker nodes. Okay, so as of now let me see, I have a lot of other servers, so I will use one of the server by installing Docker. Let me use Tomcat. No, I want to use this one. So I will install Docker inside this machine. Let me connect to this machine, and mostly I think nowadays no one is using this Docker Swarm. Let me check what is the key for this one. Patch. Okay, so yum install docker. So let me copy this command. With this token, it is going to add that particular node into the cluster. Sorry, service was not running. Service docker status, service docker start, chk config docker on. Okay, service is up now. Then just simple, we need to execute this command. The
Can't see your
node joined
screen.
it. Sorry,
Your screen is not visible.
my screen is not visible.
No, we can see.
Yeah, we can see.
Everyone able to see Ben? So please check from your
Yes,
end.
it's visible. Yeah, we can. It's visible.
So once it is done, docker node ls. This is a command. We can see how many nodes has been created. So the wherever we executed the docker swarm initialization command, that is going to become as a manager, which is showing as a leader, and this is showing as an worker node. Okay, and this is a unique ID it is going to generate. Whenever you add a node to your cluster, it will be created. Okay, so this is how it will be created, and multiple nodes you can add it here. Again, you can remove it, this node from the cluster also, and you can add multiple nodes. And basically this docker is having different components. Okay, this docker swarm. So like docker swarm components. Service is there, task component is there. Okay, so nodes, services and tasks. A service is a definition of the task to execute on the manager or worker nodes. So it is the central structure of the SWAM system and the primary root of user interaction with the SWAM. Okay, so what it will do, services means what you want to create. You want to create a web application or you want to create anything. So it will be created inside the manager node, means here. So in the manager node, we are going to execute this service and it will become as a task and will go and deploy inside this worker node. If you want to deploy an application, we will create a service here inside the master, this one manager node. So once we execute that service, and it will become as a task and it will go and execute on this particular worker nodes. So let me see Docker Swarm. You see here Docker service create --- replicas one --- name of that service, and this is the image. Okay, so when you execute, you can able to execute it. This will create a service. So this is a service, it is got created and it's created one replica and a Docker PS if you see. And
Praveen, is service a container?
see here service means like it can be anything. You can create container, you can create volumes, you can whatever the components you want to create with the help of the name. The component name is service. With that you can able to create anything. You can create containers also. Okay. Web application.
So you created service in master node or in worker node?
See that we execute in the master node. From where we want to
Oh.
create these services, these commands will be executed on the master node. So manager node, from there it will go and it will tell to the worker nodes to deploy whatever we are creating. Okay, and the worker nodes, it will be a task. Whatever the service has been created, so that will be a task to a worker node. So it will go and create those components, whatever you are defining with the service. So it will get deployed, created inside the worker nodes. Okay. So this one, Docker service create Nginx. So Nginx image it will take and it will create one container. And you can see the Docker service ls command. Manager node means where you are going to execute all these commands, Docker service create or whatever the commands you're executing. There you are going to execute this command. And what are the this will become as a task to the worker node because you are telling to create Nginx. So in the worker nodes, it will go and create this Nginx container inside any of the worker node. So if you are mentioning replicas 3, then it will go and deploy inside this machine as a 3 replicas. Okay. So here, when I created this command docker service create one replica, so where it got created when I executed it from here, if I do this command here, so I have 2 machines, so it might be created over here. So let me go and check there. Okay, this is the container got created. So now let me remove this all this remaining two. So I have two machines. One is manager, one is worker node. I mentioned Docker. What was the command? So this was the command. Okay. So when I'm using this command, what it is doing, it is creating one replica. So Docker service create -1 replicas one. The name of this service what we are creating alpine. With alpine image, it will create a container. Okay. So one replica means what? It went and deployed on the worker node. If you define two, then it will create on these two machines. So now what I'm going to do, I'll create two replicas. Okay. The same thing, I'll use Nginx here. And replicas will be two. I'm executing this on the manager node. Already exists. Okay, sorry. This service name already exists, so that's why it is giving error. Nginx world. This is a name we can give. I'm preparing two containers. Two tasks. See, overall progress 2 out of 2 tasks means when service is created, it is a task. Means we are telling that create two containers with the Nginx image. So this task will go and deploy on the worker node. Now if you check Docker PS, you see here one Nginx is there, and in another container in the another virtual machine we have Docker PS is there. So Nginx. So two containers has been created. So a lot of things is there in the this orchestration tool, but we are not focusing on Docker Swarm. So like how to access it, what are the other components we can create. If you have enough time, then you can do R&D with the Docker Swarm. So we can, because anyhow we are going to learn the Kubernetes orchestration tool. So just for timing, I am showing you how it works. So it will also take a lot of sessions if you want to learn about Docker Swarm. Then lot of components are there in the Docker Swarm. So you can do R&D if you have enough time. So tomorrow onwards, we'll start with the Kubernetes, okay, the introduction, and from tomorrow onwards, regularly we'll start the Kubernetes sessions, okay. If you have any doubts, you can ask me.
One query. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there any possibility of no manager and worker node can be in a one instance?
manager. Yes, it's
Manager
possible.
and
Yeah,
okay.
possible.
And
Your
one more
manager
query
can
is like
also become as a worker node also.
okay, okay. And the other query is like can we do FTP to any container? Is it possible?
What is the purpose of FTP?
No, it's like I have personal interest on that, so I just
No, no,
asking.
I'm just asking what is
Mhm.
FTP? Why you want to do FTP?
Like if I'm working on WordPress, no, sometimes
Hmm.
I need to edit no PHP files, so I wanted to do FTP to the container.
Yeah, see, when you want to do FTP, you need to install
Mhm.
FTP package inside that container, right? VS
Okay.
FTP, if it is a VS FTP package is there, FTP package need to be installed. So FTP will listen on which port?
Mm, it is
2021. Okay.
2020.
So
Okay.
2021 port should be exposed. So you need to do port forwarding for that container.
Okay.
2021 also should be able to accessible from the external. So once it
Okay.
is done, then you can able to access that FTP.
Okay. Okay. So
Okay.
it is same like normal instance. Okay.
Yeah. Only thing is you need to do port forwarding. Otherwise, you cannot able to access it from the outside. Or else on
Okay.
internally you can able to access. Means from one container to another container you can able to access it. But from outside, if you want to access it, then you should do port forwarding. Then only it will be accessible.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
So Praveen, I have a question.
Yeah.
So can you please explain the difference between entry point and CMD once again with some example?
See, entry point, CMD, both will do the same, but only difference is CMD can be modified during the runtime, and entry point we cannot modify whatever the value you are giving. That is not going to be modified during the runtime. That is the only difference between CMD and entry point.
I have a question.
Okay.
If we want,
Yeah.
if we need to troubleshoot any issue with the container, I mean, how do we go about that? I mean, what are the basic commands that we can use to troubleshoot?
Yeah, you can use Docker logs and the container ID. So these are the logs you can use whether the container is having any problem, any errors you want to see. So the Docker logs is going to help you, the Docker log command and the container ID. It will help you to check what is happening with that container to troubleshoot.
Praveen, one thing more.
Yeah.
Like when we write these Linux commands, so in some commands you use bash at the end, like for shell, and somewhere
Mm.
you use sh, somewhere bin
Yeah.
bash. So is there any difference or like the same?
See, there is a difference between bash and sh. Okay, but bin bash or only give bash or sh, that doesn't matter. Okay, it will take bash also directly. If you give bash, it will take the bash shell, or if you give only sh, it will take sh shell. No need to give bin always. Okay, so sometimes basically I prefer bash because bash is going to have tab. So if you use tab once you log into the container, so tab will work with the bash shell. That's why I prefer bash shell instead of sh shell. So you can use any shell that container should be have that shell. If that container doesn't have the shell, then what are the shell it is available, we need to use it. So mostly every container will have bash. So preferably we can use bash shell itself.
So
More
how do we
friendly with.
decide? How do we
Hmm?
decide like how do we know that we should use bash over here or sh or some other?
See that we can't tell. It completely depends upon the image. For example, if you're using Jenkins, if you're using Jenkins container or Nginx container, backend you don't know which OS they might be taking, whether they're taking Debian, Ubuntu, or CentOS or Alpine. We don't know. So we just need to try before logging to the container. We should check that